What is up, everybody, and welcome to FLW Videos. In today's episode, we have a very exciting deep dive to talk about, and it's all about Shadow Mewtwo, which was exclusive to Pokemon Go Fest 2020, but in the future it could end up rolling out, so if you didn't attend Go Fest, I still recommend you watching this video so you know exactly what you want to do with this Pokemon. And for those of you curious about how mine turned out, I actually ended up getting a 98% IV, but unfortunately it didn't get a 15 in attack, so I had to transfer it. That's a joke, but believe it or not, people were actually transferring their Shadow Mewtwo's, which just blows my mind. But not only that, people were also purifying their Shadow Mewtwo's just to get a 100% purified Mewtwo without even necessarily knowing the difference between Shadow and Purified. So I honestly think we should give a moment of silence to those trainers out there who purified it. Yeah, I'm going to show you why you shouldn't have done that. As far as the simulations are concerned, we're going to be comparing Shadow Pokemon with good IVs to bad IVs to Purify Pokemon with excellent IVs, and of course everything in between. So if you do enjoy this episode, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the video. So let's go ahead and start it off with the stats for Mewtwo and go ahead and get a little bit of a recap. So as far as its best stat is concerned, we've got an attack stat of 300 that's ranked at 21st in Pokemon Go, and then its defense stat is probably going to be like the only kind of bad thing about it. Its stamina stat is looking pretty good, and it maintains an overall ranking of 28th in Pokemon Go. Now before you go ahead and start typing in the comment section, why is it ranked at 28th? Well, these rankings actually go ahead and include all of the Mega Evolution Pokemon in here as well. So as far as beating Mewtwo, you've got the Mega Mewtwo X and Mega Mewtwo Y that are ahead of itself. But even then, as far as this Pokemon is concerned, with all the Megas added in, it's still at 28th, which is very impressive. Just wanted to go ahead and clarify that. Now, let's go ahead and dive a little bit into the movesets. As far as the movesets are concerned, we've got some decent fast moves, of course, from the Psychic typing. And in today's episode, I can go ahead and spoil a little bit. We're going to be taking a look at Thunderbolt, Ice Beam, Psychic. We are skipping the other ones, unfortunately, it just didn't work out for them. Shadow Ball, and then Psystrike. So we're going to take a look at all of these, and of course there's going to be a combination between Confusion as well as Psycho Cut. That's going to happen at the end of the simulation, so we're of course going to cover some information about the raids, and then dive into the PvP portion. And believe it or not, I can't showcase all of the screenshots on here, because there are just so many simulations that we have to do, so let's go ahead and head over to Pokebattler. And then secondarily, I'm going to talk a little bit about the caveats related to the simulations. But as you can see, we've got Shadow Mewtwo in at that #1 position, taking over its former self, jumping up by roughly 14 seconds. But here's going to be the catch and the general rule of thumb, at least as far as I'm concerned. So with Shadow Mewtwo, we technically only get one Shadow Mewtwo. That's very important to consider, because when we go up against some of these simulations with a legendary Pokemon, there are going to be 20, 30, 40 faints for these Shadow Mewtwo's, and you simply don't have access to them. So my general rule of thumb is if you see Shadow Mewtwo in at the #1 position, you want to use it on your team, and then you want to backfill it with the second best option, the third best option, whatever you have made available in this particular case. So in reality, the best possible time that could end up occurring is somewhere between these two simulations. You go in with Shadow Mewtwo, you put in some work, and then Mewtwo comes in later, of course, if you've got 100% with Psystrike, and it's going to end up being somewhere in there, hopefully more favorably towards this time to win, but hopefully you kind of get what I mean, and we'll of course explain this one more time. But as far as Psystrike is concerned, it officially takes over that #1 position yet again with the Shadow variation. So now we're going to go up against Mewtwo, and in this particular case, we're going to be looking at that move Shadow Ball, which is also an exclusive move. So as far as the results are concerned, Shadow Mewtwo takes over the #1 position again. Now, as far as the times to win are concerned, honestly, Weavile is not that far behind, and Tyranitar, I mean, it's separated a little bit more, and then of course you've got a Pokemon like Chandelure, so you would want to go in with Shadow Mewtwo like we said before, and then backfill it with your next best option that you possibly have. So as far as the best overall time to win, it would be a 5:39 if you could get 26 Shadow Mewtwo's, but we just know that that is impossible. So it's like the best individual Pokemon, but you can't just go off of these simulations because you can't get a team of Shadow Pokemon that are Mewtwo's, at least at this point in time. But as you can see, taking over that #1 spot from the Shadow Ball side. Now we're going to go ahead and get into Icebeam. Icebeam also actually got some very good results as well, going up against Landorus. And as you can see in this particular case, we got Shadow Mewtwo in at that #2 position. As far as the times to win are concerned, not that far behind. Of course, you do have a ton of feints being involved, but technically it's not as glassy as a Shadow Weavile. I personally don't have Shadow Weaviles. I have a ton of Mamoswines in this particular case, but regardless of that, Shadow Mewtwo, I think, deserves a slot in here. Now, as far as the movesets are concerned, for me personally, I want to go ahead and Elite TM over to something like a Psy Strike, for example, and then maybe eventually unlock a secondary charge move and just rotate that move around to whatever makes sense for whatever raid boss I'm doing. Whether it's going to be Ice Beam, Thunderbolt, Flamethrower, you know, you kind of get the picture. Because those aren't exclusive moves, I don't mind just using a TM to change those out. You end up getting one of the best Pokemon from a lot of different typings. So let me know what you think about that in the comment section below. Now we're going to go up against the Kyogre, where we can see Mewtwo using Thunderbolt, and it also does fairly well. So let's go ahead and see how it does. Of course, we do see a little bit of a slip in the performance, but honestly, that's just because it doesn't have the right quick move in this particular case. But even then, it's still taking into that #5 position, which is just insane. And as far as usability, availability are concerned, people have definitely got themselves some Zekroms along the way. Raikou was also available for Giovanni quite some time ago, so who knows? I mean, I think that it's kind of worth it. I'm going to opt to not focus on it from the Thunderbolt perspective just because the performance is not necessarily that great. And then also, just to briefly mention, as far as Flamethrower is concerned, you end up using it maybe against something like a Steel type, Ice, Grass, you know, those types of things. But the issue is that as far as the secondary typings are concerned, Mewtwo doesn't actually do that well with Flamethrower, so I wanted to go ahead and mention that because people may be curious about that. So now let's go ahead and get into some crazy simulations against Virizion. We can really learn a lot from this. Of course, we are going to go at it from the Psychic route just to showcase the different times to win in this particular case. So the ideal, best case scenario is you go in with a Psy Strike Shadow 100% Mewtwo, and you end up getting a time to win of 448. Now, let's say, for example, that you end up getting a 10-10-10 Shadow Mewtwo, which a lot of people, you know, might be disappointed by it, but check this out. It ends up being in the second position, and it only ends up losing, like, what, 6 seconds, 7 seconds? That's not bad at all. And then, let's go ahead and see what happens if you decide to not use a charge or an Elite Charge TM at all. You end up using that move Psychic. There is a bit of a drop, but honestly, it's really not that bad overall. And then, of course, if you go down to a 10-10-10 with Psychic and you don't have that exclusive move Psy Strike, it takes on the next position. You lose about 8 seconds doing that. And then finally, what about a 100% IV Mewtwo with Psy Strike that's either Purified, Normal, doesn't matter, they're both actually exactly the same. You end up with a time to win of 537, giving up, I don't even know how many seconds from this, can't quite do it in my head like that, what, 90 seconds from something like that? That's how much time to win you just gave up on a raid like this, which is exactly why I am stressing to people to not purify their Pokemon at this point in time, because there's no incentive to. Maybe in the future they adjust the Purify Pokemon and then it would make sense to go ahead and do that, but if you keep them in Shadow, you can always go ahead and purify them whenever you want if something gets updated to Purified. But as you can see, it's just a huge drop off as far as that performance is concerned. Now, when we go ahead and head over into PvP, we've got some kind of interesting things going on with Shadow Mewtwo. It's not as good of an option as you would kind of think initially. Now, as far as the best rankings are concerned, it ended up doing best in the Masters League. And of course, we've got Mewtwo here, but the regular Mewtwo actually takes on the #1 spot technically, or the #1 spot compared to all the other Mewtwo's. So Shadow Mewtwo is the second best Mewtwo form made available, and you would have to go with Psy Strike as well as Shadow Ball, so going to be fairly expensive to, of course, manage all of this, and you're going to have to use double Elite Charge TMs in that particular case. And then we've got just the Armored Mewtwo down here quite a bit, though. So as far as using your Shadow Mewtwo on the PvP side, it's really not that big of a difference. It just kind of works out that way sometimes from the PvP side versus the raid side. So is this Pokemon worth powering up? Absolutely, go ahead and do that. The cool thing about keeping Mewtwo as a Shadow Pokemon is if there for some reason ends up being an update to the purified Pokemon, they end up getting a different bonus or a better bonus, you just purify it. If you go ahead and purify it now, then you're missing out on all the gains as the Shadow Pokemon now, because they are clearly in the lead. And as far as what I plan to do with the movesets, I do want to use an Elite Charge TM to get Psy Strike. And then for the second move, I might leave it open and potentially just rotate and use the Charge TMs to cycle through like Ice Beam, Thunderbolt, those types of moves just to kind of save them, because Mewtwo still ends up being a very solid option. In some cases beat my #1 options that I have. Like I got a ton of Mamoswine, but with this Shadow Mewtwo and Ice Beam, it ends up beating it. So hopefully this video ended up helping you. I hope you are excited about it. And if you don't have one now, I could see this Pokemon coming back at some point in time. So make sure that you do stick around for that. But anyways, let me know what you think about Shadow Mewtwo in the comment section below. How good were your IVs? Do you plan to use it from PvP? What do you plan on using it? Anything and everything, let me know in the comment section below, and I will see you next time. Huge shout out to the supporters over at Patreon. If you would like to get exclusive perks, make sure to check out that link in the description, and I will see you next time.